Alright, today we'll be cleaning a carburetor on a 2012 SSR125 dirt bike. Now, first thing, we pulled the carburetor off already, throttle cable, we've pulled it off, but I'll kind of go through how we did that there. We've got your choke here, and that essentially just opens up that butterfly, allows more airflow through there. We've got your inlet here for your fuel. We've got your idle adjust over here, which is a broken off bolt at this point. We've got your bowl here, and this is your throttle or your fuel drain right here. And this hose will go kind of wrap around the motor to go beneath the motor, so your fuel isn't dumping onto your motor. So pulled the throttle cable off already, like I said, but just to do that, it's got an aluminum cap here with a spring, and then we've got your slide all the way down here. We should be able to pull this out freely, this slide, which is your needle here as well. Your needle is adjustable. You go ahead and pull, there's a clip down in here that you pull out, and that'll allow you to adjust that needle if need be, depending on altitude, riding conditions, performance. But that's your needle. Make sure that's free and clear. Make sure this slides up and down in your carburetor well. Your idle adjust here, which I mentioned, the screw is broke off at this point, but to turn your idle up, turn your screw clockwise, and essentially what that is doing, pushing this slide up, allowing more air through there. So we've got the top cap off. Now we're going to pull this bottom bowl here. You've got your air fuel screw here, and the way you adjust that is before you do anything to your carburetor, if you're cleaning it, pulling it apart, turn this screw all the way in and count those number of turns. So I just count half, 1.5. So if I'm pulling the screw out, I know I need to run it all the way in, and then 1.5 turns out is the proper adjustment there. And a manual will tell you where that needs to be. To pull this bottom bowl off here, 3 Phillips screws. This is aluminum carburetor, and so we don't need to torque these screws down extremely hard. It'll make them hard to come off of there when it comes time to pull this bottom bowl. If you're draining fuel for the year, if your bike's going to sit for the winter, or you've got bad fuel in there, what you can do, as long as your bike is, as long as you haven't sucked any debris up into those jets, you can pull this screw here. It's a Phillips flathead combination screw. If you pull that, run it out a couple turns, all your fuel will dump out of here. So all the fuel that's in this bowl will dump out this bottom nipple here. You can do that if you need, but a lot of times it's best just to pull this bowl, blow through all the jets, make sure it's all clean. So there's your bowl there. This gasket right here, this O-ring, is a common issue, so make sure this is sealed well. Make sure it's not ripped. Make sure there's no debris stuck in there. We've got your float here, main jet, pilot jet, and again your idle screw, or your air fuel screw here. So go ahead and pull this pin out here, and we'll get to your needle and seat. The way you do that is just find yourself a pick or something like it, and just set your pick on there. And you don't ever want to use too much force on here. You will break these aluminum posts off of the carburetor. So we're able to push that pin out a ways there. You know, we might have to grab a pair of pliers to pull on this pin. Sometimes they stick, but again, you don't want to use too much pressure. You don't want to break these posts off right here, either post. Once you do that, your carburetor is destroyed. So pull this bottom float off here, and we've got your needle here. This is your needle, this is your seat. So if a carb kit talks about a needle and seat, that's what it's talking about. And these needles will get grooved in there. Sometimes they get debris down in your seat here, causing your carburetor to stay stuck open, or your inlet there to stay stuck open, allowing fuel to drain in there. And that would be why you have fuel dumping out the bottom of your carburetor. When it's sitting there, when you're going over jumps, when it's bouncing around on the trailer, it's because this is sitting there flopping, going up into your overflow here and dumping out the bottom. So if you need to adjust this, you can slightly, this tab right here, you're able to adjust that, and you just do that if this is slightly worn. But if this is grooved at all, I'd suggest replacing that needle and seat. Now we've got your main jet here, and this is a 98. And what you do here is a flat head screwdriver and pull this out. Now a lot of times what will come out together is your main jet holder as well as your main jet, and your main jet's actually just a little jet that sits up top here, a little screw. If that's the only thing that comes out, that's perfectly fine. If this all comes out together, that's fine too. You want to make sure when you're cleaning these, you blow through them with compressed air. Make sure they're completely free of debris, any kind of bad fuel that could be in there. If you hold them up to light, you should be able to see through there. They're small ports and they get plugged easily, so make sure that you can see through there. Now your pilot jet is even a smaller port, and it is actually kind of hard even holding it up to light to see through there. This is a 40 pilot jet, and this is what's used to start your bike. So not holding your throttle open at all, turning your choke on, fuel will come up through your pilot jet here and go into your motor, start your bike. If this is plugged up, your bike will not be easy to start. You'll be having to pull fuel up through the main jet, twisting your throttle there, allowing fuel to come up through there. That's not a good way to start your bike. You just want to make sure this pilot jet is free and clear of dirt and debris. So to put that back together now, just go ahead and slide that once we've blown through there with compressed air. Used gum out carbon choke cleaner. Here is safe to use on carburetors. We can go ahead and put it back together. Go ahead and screw that pilot jet back down into that motor. Again, you're going into an aluminum carburetor, so just don't have to torque these down a whole lot. Just make sure that they're snug and get them tightened up there. When you are putting the carburetor back together, make sure your O-rings are seated where they need to be. A lot of times when you use gas, carb cleaner, stuff like that, it'll allow those O-rings to expand, causing them not to fit as well. And so you want to make sure that those are going into place how they should. If they have expanded too much, you can go ahead and put them in the sun. A lot of times that'll allow that to shrink down, dry out, and fit like it should. Make sure these are tight enough so they're not coming out while you're riding, because this carburetor is sitting upside down like this. A lot of times those jets can wobble out if they're not snug. Then we can go ahead and double check that O-ring, slide your bowl back on there, put your 3 Phillips screws back in there. Tighten these down. Again, this is aluminum carburetor, so you do not need to tighten these down a bunch. Just make sure that they're snug. That way, if you're ever having to pull this bowl off again, you'll be able to. A lot of times you can use vice grips on here to loosen these screws just because of how they're positioned. Most of the time you're able to get those on there. So slide your needle and your slide down in there, and it'll just go one way. But you want to make sure you hold your carburetor up and down straight so that your needle will slide down right into your main jet holder. If you are holding it at an angle like this, trying to slide that slide down, it'll cause that needle to not fall into the right groove, keeping your slide from going all the way down. So that is a carburetor on a SSR125 dirt bike.